Othello starts off evolved on a street in Venice, inside the midst of a controversy among Roderigo, a rich man, and Iago. Roderigo has been paying Iago to assist him in his match to Desdemona. But Roderigo has simply discovered that Desdemona has married Othello, a widespread whom Iago begrudgingly serves as ensign. Iago says he hates Othello, who these days handed him over for the location of lieutenant in desire of the inexperienced soldier Michael Cassio. Unseen, Iago and Roderigo cry out to Brabantio that his daughter Desdemona has been stolen through and married to Othello, the Moor. Brabantio finds that his daughter is indeed lacking, and he gathers a few officers to find Othello. Not wanting his hatred of Othello to be recognized, Iago leaves Roderigo and hurries return to Othello earlier than Brabantio sees him. At Othello's accommodations, Cassio arrives with an urgent message from the Duke. Othello's assistance is wished inside the depend of the upcoming Turkish invasion of Cyprus. No longer long afterward, Brabantio arrives with Roderigo and others, and accuses Othello of stealing his daughter by using witchcraft. When he finds out that Othello is on his way to talk with the Duke, Brabantio makes a decision to head along and accuse Othello before the assembled Senate. Brabantio's plan backfires. The Duke and Senate are very sympathetic in the direction of Othello. Given a danger to speak for himself, Othello explains that he wooed and received Desdemona, not with the aid of witchcraft, however with the stories of his adventures in travel and struggle. The Duke finds Othello's clarification convincing, and Desdemona herself enters at this factor to protect her choice in marriage and to announce to her father that her allegiance is now to her husband. Brabantio is annoyed, however acquiesces and lets in the Senate meeting to renew. The Duke says that Othello must go to Cyprus to aid within the defense against the Turks, who are headed for the island. Desdemona insists that she accompany her husband on his trip, and preparations are made for them to go away that night. In Cyprus the following day, two gentlemen stand on the shore with Montano, the governor of Cyprus. A third gentleman arrives and reports that the Turkish fleet has been wrecked in a storm at sea. Cassio, whose ship did not suffer the same fate, arrives quickly after, observed by a 2D deliver carrying Iago, Roderigo, Desdemona, and Emilia, Iago's wife. After they have landed, Othello's ship is sighted, and the organization is going to the harbor. As they await Othello, Cassio greets Desdemona by clasping her hand. Watching them, Iago tells the target audience that he will use as little a web as this hand protecting to ensnare Cassio. 2.169. Othello arrives, greets his wife, and announces that there might be reveling that night time to celebrate Cyprus's protection from the Turks. As soon as everyone has left, Roderigo complains to Iago that he has no threat of breaking up Othello's marriage. Iago assures Roderigo that as soon as Desdemona's blood is made stupid with the act of recreation, she can get bored in Othello and are looking for sexual satisfaction some other place. 222. But Iago warns that someplace else will in all likelihood be with Cassio. Iago counsels Roderigo that he must cast Cassio into shame through beginning a fight with Cassio at the night's revels. In a soliloquy, Iago explains to the target market that putting off Cassio is the primary vital step in his plan to destroy Othello. That night, Iago gets Cassio inebriated and then sends Roderigo to begin a combat with him. Seemingly provoked by way of Roderigo, Cassio chases Roderigo across the stage. Governor Montano attempts to hold Cassio down, and Cassio stabs him. Iago sends Roderigo to elevate alarm inside the metropolis. The alarm is rung, and Othello, who had left in advance with plans to consummate his marriage, quickly arrives to still the commotion. When Othello needs to realize who commenced the fight, Iago feigns reluctance to implicate his buddy Cassio, but he ultimately tells the complete tale. Othello then strips Cassio of his rank of lieutenant. Cassio is extremely disenchanted, and he laments to Iago, as soon as everybody else has gone, that his reputation has been ruined for all time. Iago assures Cassio that he can get returned into Othello's accurate graces by the usage of Desdemona as a middleman. In a soliloquy, Iago tells us that he will frame Cassio and Desdemona as fans to make Othello jealous. In an attempt at reconciliation, Cassio sends a few musicians to play beneath Othello's window. Othello, however, sends his clown to inform the musicians to go away. Hoping to arrange an assembly with Desdemona, Cassio asks the clown, a peasant who serves Othello, to ship Emilia to him. After the clown departs, Iago passes by means of and tells Cassio that he's going to get Othello out of the manor in order that Cassio can communicate privately with Desdemona. Othello, Iago, and a gentleman go to study a number of the city's fortifications. Desdemona is pretty sympathetic to Cassio's request and promises that she will be able to do the entirety she will to make Othello forgive his former lieutenant. As Cassio is about to depart, Othello and Iago go back. Feeling uneasy, Cassio leaves without speaking to Othello. Othello inquires whether or not it changed into Cassio who just parted from his wife, and Iago, starting to kindle Othello's fire of jealousy, replies, "No, certain, I can't assume it, that he could steal away so guilty like, seeing you're coming." 3.E.3739. Othello turns into disappointed and moody, and Iago furthers his purpose of doing away with both Cassio and Othello via suggesting that Cassio and Desdemona are involved in an affair. Desdemona's entreaties to Othello to reinstate Cassio as lieutenant add to Othello's almost instant conviction that his wife is untrue. After Othello's verbal exchange with Iago, Desdemona comes to call Othello to supper and finds him feeling sick. She gives him her handkerchief to wrap around his head, however he finds it to be too little and lets it drop to the floor. 3.E.291. Desdemona and Othello go to dinner, and Emilia picks up the handkerchief, mentioning to the target market that Iago has always desired her to scouse borrow it for him. Iago is ecstatic when Emilia offers him the handkerchief, which he plant life in Cassio's room as evidence of his affair with Desdemona. While Othello needs ocular evidence, 3.E.365, that his wife is untrue, Iago says that he has visible Cassio wipe his beard. 3.E.444, with Desdemona's handkerchief, the primary gift Othello ever gave her. Othello vows to take vengeance on his wife and on Cassio, and Iago vows that he's going to help him. While Othello sees Desdemona later that night time, he demands the handkerchief of her, but she tells him that she does now not have it along with her and tries to alternate the subject by using persevering with her fit on Cassio's behalf. This drives Othello right into a similar rage, and he storms out. Later, Cassio comes on stage, wondering about the handkerchief he has just determined in his chamber. He's greeted through Bianca, a prostitute, whom he asks to take the handkerchief and copy its embroidery for him. Through Iago's machinations, Othello will become so consumed by means of jealousy that he falls right into a trance and has a match of epilepsy. As he writhes on the ground, Cassio comes through, and Iago tells him to come back again in a couple of minutes to talk. As soon as Othello recovers, Iago tells him of the meeting he has deliberate with Cassio. He instructs Othello to cover close by and watch as Iago extracts from Cassio the tale of his affair with Desdemona. Whilst Othello stands out of earshot, Iago pumps Cassio for statistics about Bianca, inflicting Cassio to snigger and verify Othello's suspicions. Bianca herself then enters with Desdemona's handkerchief, reprimanding Cassio for making her copy out the embroidery of a love token given to him by way of another girl. When Desdemona enters with Lodovico and Lodovico subsequently gives Othello a letter from Venice calling him home and instating Cassio as his substitute, Othello goes over the threshold, placing Desdemona, after which storming out. That night, Othello accuses Desdemona of being a whore. He ignores her protestations, seconded by Emilia, that she is innocent. Iago assures Desdemona that Othello is definitely disenchanted about topics of nation. Later that night, Othello ominously tells Desdemona to look ahead to him in mattress and to ship Emilia away. In the meantime, Iago assures the nevertheless complaining Roderigo that the whole thing goes as planned. With a view to save Desdemona and Othello from leaving, Roderigo must kill Cassio. Then he will have a clear road to his love. Iago instructs Roderigo to ambush Cassio, but Roderigo misses his mark and Cassio wounds him rather. Iago wounds Cassio and runs away. While Othello hears Cassio's cry, he assumes that Iago has killed Cassio as he stated he could. Lodovico and Graziano enter to see what the commotion is ready. Iago enters shortly thereafter and flies right into a faux rage as he discovers Cassio's assailant Roderigo, whom he murders. Cassio is taken to have his wound dressed. In the meantime, Othello stands over his sound asleep wife of their bedchamber, making ready to kill her. Desdemona wakes and attempts to plead with Othello. She asserts her innocence, but Othello smothers her. Emilia enters with the information that Roderigo is dead. Othello asks if Cassio is useless too, and is mortified, while Emilia says he is not. After crying out that she has been murdered, Desdemona modifications her tale before she dies, claiming that she has devoted suicide. Emilia asks Othello what took place, and Othello tells her that he has killed Desdemona for her infidelity, which Iago introduced to his attention. Montano, Graziano, and Iago come into the room. Iago tries to silence Emilia, who realizes what Iago has completed. At first, Othello insists that Iago has instructed the fact, citing the handkerchief as proof. As soon as Emilia tells him how she located the handkerchief and gave it to Iago, Othello is crushed and begins to weep. He tries to kill Iago, however is disarmed. Iago kills Emilia and flees, however he's stuck with the aid of Lodovico and Montano, who go back protecting Iago captive. Additionally, they deliver Cassio, who's now in a chair due to his wound. Othello wounds Iago and is disarmed. Lodovico tells Othello that he must include them back to Venice to be tried. Othello makes a speech approximately how he would really like to be remembered, then kills himself with a sword he had hidden on his individual. The play closes with a speech with the aid of Lodovico. He gives Othello's residence and goods to Graziano and orders that Iago be achieved.